Emily Watson sat at her small desk in the corner of the busy London office. Her fingers moved quickly across the computer keyboard as she worked on her newest project. The office was full of people talking and phones ringing, but Emily liked to work quietly. She was the type of person who believed her work should speak for her, not loud words or big gestures. Emily had grown up in a small village called Little Thornton, far from the big city of London. Her family was not rich. Her father worked at the local factory, and her mother cleaned houses to make extra money. When Emily was young, she discovered she had a special talent for computers. She could understand how they worked better than most people. Her grandmother always told her, "You have a gift, dear one. Use it well." Getting to this London office had not been easy for Emily. She had worked 3 different jobs while studying. At university, she cleaned offices at night, served coffee in the morning, and studied computer science during the day. She barely slept, but she never gave up. When she finally graduated with top marks, she felt proud. She thought the hard part was over, but she was wrong. James Fletcher made sure Emily knew she was different every single day. James was the senior project manager at the company. He was tall and handsome, with perfect clothes and an expensive watch. He came from a wealthy London family where success was normal. His father was a famous businessman, and his mother was a lawyer. James had never had to work 3 jobs or worry about money. He had never felt out of place or unsure of himself. That Tuesday morning started like many others. Emily arrived early and began working on her latest idea. She had been thinking about a new way to make the company's computer systems work better and faster. She had spent weeks writing the computer code and testing her ideas. She believed it could help the company save money and work more efficiently. James walked into the office later that morning, carrying his expensive coffee and wearing his perfect suit. He saw Emily at her desk and decided to have some fun, as he called it. Well, look who's trying to play with the big boys again," James said loudly as he walked past Emily's desk. His voice was so loud that everyone in the office could hear him. Several people looked up from their computers to see what was happening. Emily felt her face turn red with embarrassment. But she did not look up from her computer screen. She kept typing, hoping James would just walk away and leave her alone. But James was not finished. "I heard you submitted another one of your little ideas to the development team," James continued. He sat down on the edge of Emily's desk without asking permission, making himself comfortable. "Emily, love, when will you learn that just because you can write a bit of computer code doesn't mean you understand how real business works?" The entire office became quiet. Everyone stopped what they were doing to watch what would happen next. Emily could feel all their eyes on her. Some people looked uncomfortable, but nobody said anything to help her. Emily remembered her grandmother's words. "Keep your head high, dear one. Your worth isn't determined by someone else's cruelty." Emily took a deep breath and spoke softly. "I believe my proposal has merit," she said, her voice barely loud enough for others to hear. James threw his head back and laughed loudly. The sound made Emily jump in her chair. "Merit," he said, still laughing. "Emily, you grew up in some tiny village, didn't you? This is London, sweetheart. This is the real world. Maybe you should stick to what you know best, making tea and filing paperwork." Emily's hands began to shake as she continued typing on her keyboard. She thought about all the hard work she had done to get here. She thought about the 3 jobs, the long nights studying, the computer science degree she had earned with the highest marks. She thought about her parents working extra hours to help pay for her education. She thought about her grandmother selling her jewelry to buy Emily her first computer. She deserved to be here just as much as anyone else. She knew she was smart and talented. But listening to James laugh at her made her start to doubt herself. Maybe he was right. Maybe she really didn't belong in this world of confident people and expensive clothes. As James walked away from her desk, still chuckling to himself. Emily felt smaller than she had in a long time. The other people in the office slowly went back to their work, but she could tell they felt uncomfortable about what had happened. Nobody came over to ask if she was okay. Nobody told her that James was wrong. Emily tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept replaying James's words. She looked round the office at all the confident people in their nice clothes, and she wondered if she would ever truly fit in. What Emily didn't know was that someone had been watching the entire scene. In the corn office, with glass windows, Dr. Margaret Harrison sat at her desk. She was the chief technology officer of the company, and she had seen everything that happened. Her expression grew darker and more serious as she watched James humiliate Emily. Dr. Harrison had been quietly observing Emily's work for months, and she was very impressed with the young woman's talent and dedication. 3 weeks had passed since that terrible Tuesday morning when James Fletcher had humiliated Emily Watson in front of the entire office. The effects of his cruel words were spreading through Emily's life like ripples in a pond, touching everything and making it harder. Emily noticed the changes right away. Sarah from accounting, who used to invite her to lunch every Friday, suddenly became very busy when lunchtime came round. Mark from the design team, who used to stop by her desk to chat about weekend plans, now walked past without even looking in her direction. It was as if James's public mockery had made her invisible to everyone else. The worst part was the project meetings. Emily had always been quiet in these meetings, but she used to contribute good ideas when she felt they were needed. Now, whenever she tried to speak up, something strange would happen. People would glance nervously toward James Fletcher before responding to her. Their faces would show worry, as if they were afraid of what James might say or do if they agreed with Emily's suggestions. Emily began to understand that her colleagues were not being mean on purpose. They were scared. They had seen how James treated her, and they did not want to become his next target. But understanding this did not make Emily feel any less lonely. So Emily started staying at the office later and later each evening, after everyone else had gone home. After the phone stopped ringing and the conversations ended, the office became a different place. It was quiet and peaceful. The only sounds were the gentle humming of computers and the soft glow of the desk lamps that Emily kept on while she worked. In this quiet space, Emily felt safe to be herself again. She could focus on what she loved most in the world, solving problems through computer code. Here, with no one watching or judging, she could let her mind work freely. Her fingers would dance across the keyboard as she wrote line after line of code, creating something beautiful and useful. Emily had been working on something very special during these late evening hours. For months, she had been developing a new software program that could make the company's computer systems work much better. She called it a data processing algorithm. But what it really did was amazing. It could take all the messy, complicated information that the company dealt with every day and organize it in a way that was clean and efficient. If her program worked the way she believed it would, it could save Thompson and Associates hundreds of thousands of pounds every year. The company would be able to work faster, make fewer mistakes, and serve their clients better. Emily had tested her program over and over again, and every test showed the same wonderful results. But every time Emily thought about presenting her program to the management team, she heard James Fletcher's voice echoing in her mind. Just because you can write a bit of code doesn't mean you understand how real business works. The words haunted her, making her doubt herself even though she knew her work was good. Emily's phone buzzed one evening as she sat alone in the empty office. It was a text message from her mother back home in Little Thornton. "How are you doing? Love." The message read, "Dad and I are so proud of you working in the big city. We tell everyone about our daughter, the computer expert." Emily stared at the message on her phone screen, and suddenly she felt the full weight of everything her family had sacrificed for her. Her parents had worked extra shifts at the local factory, coming home exhausted night after night. Also, they could help pay for her university education. Her father's hands were rough and calloused from the factory work, but he never complained. Emily remembered her grandmother most of all. When Emily was accepted to university but could not afford her first computer, her grandmother had quietly sold her precious wedding ring. It was the only valuable thing she owned, a beautiful gold ring that Emily's grandfather had given her more than 50 years ago. "Education is more important than old jewelry," her grandmother had said with a smile. But Emily had seen the sadness in her eyes as she handed over the ring. All of these people believed in Emily. They had given up so much because they knew she had a special gift. Emily could not give up now. No matter how difficult James Fletcher made her life, she owed it to her family to keep trying. As Emily worked through another late evening, typing code and testing her program, she had no idea that someone else was also working late in the building. Up in the corner office with the glass windows, Dr. Margaret Harrison sat at her desk, reading reports and reviewing company projects. Dr. Margaret Harrison was the Chief Technology Officer of Thompson and Associates. One of the most important people in the entire company, she was known for working very long hours and rarely left her office before midnight. But Dr. Harrison was not just reviewing normal reports that evening. She had been paying very close attention to two things: Emily Watson's exceptional work and James Fletcher's terrible behavior. Dr. Harrison had built her career and her reputation on one simple principle: she could recognize talent wherever she found it, and she always protected those who needed protection. The time for action was coming soon. Dr. Margaret Harrison did not become one of the most powerful women in London's technology world by luck or accident. At 52 years old, she had fought hard for every success, every promotion, and every opportunity that came her way. She was now one of the most respected technology leaders in all of Europe. But the journey to reach this position had been filled with difficult battles. Margaret remembered very clearly what it felt like to be different in the workplace. She remembered being the only woman in meeting rooms full of men who would talk over her or ignore her ideas completely. She remembered having to work twice as hard as everyone else just to prove she belonged. She remembered the loneliness of eating lunch by herself because her male colleagues did not include her in their conversations. Most of all, Margaret remembered the feeling of being small and powerless when people treated her badly because she was different from them. Those memories had never left her, even after all these years of success. That was exactly why James Fletcher's behavior toward Emily Watson made Margaret feel so angry. Every time she saw James mock the young woman or dismiss her ideas, Margaret felt her old anger rising up inside her. She knew exactly what Emily was going through because she had lived through the same experiences many years ago. For months, Margaret had been quietly watching Emily's work from her corner office. As the Chief Technology Officer, Margaret had access to all the computer systems and could review everyone's projects. What she discovered about Emily's work impressed her greatly. Emily's computer code was clean and well organized, showing that she understood the complex systems better than most people in the company. Her ideas were creative and innovative, always looking for new ways to solve old problems. Emily's latest project was particularly amazing. The algorithm she had created was nothing short of brilliant. Margaret had seen many computer programs in her long career, But Emily's work showed a level of skill and understanding that was rare even among experienced programmers. If the company used Emily's algorithm, it would save them enormous amounts of time and money. But what impressed Margaret most about Emily was not her technical skills, though those were excellent. What impressed Margaret most was Emily's character and strength. Despite months of James Fletcher's cruel treatment, Emily continued to produce outstanding work. She never gave up, never became bitter or angry, and never stopped trying to do her best. Margaret had also noticed that Emily stayed late many evenings to help other colleagues with their computer problems. Even people who ignored her during the day would come to Emily when they needed technical help, and Emily always helped them with kindness and patience. She never complained about James's behavior to anyone, and she never spoke badly about the people who treated her poorly. This combination of brilliant technical skills and strong personal character convinced Margaret that Emily Watson was exactly the kind of person the company needed to support and promote. Margaret had seen enough. It was time to act. On a Thursday morning, Margaret made a decision that surprised everyone in the office. She left her corner office and walked down to the main floor where all the regular employees worked. This was something Margaret rarely did. Most people only saw her during important company meetings or special events. Her corner office was on a different floor, and she usually communicated with employees through emails or meetings in conference rooms. As Margaret walked through the workspace, colleagues looked up from their computers with surprise and curiosity. Some people had worked for the company for years without ever speaking directly to Dr. Harrison. She was a legend in the technology world, someone they read about in business magazines and newspapers. Margaret walked directly to Emily's small desk in the corner. Emily was typing on her computer, focused on her work as always. She looked up when Margaret's shadow fell across her desk, and her eyes grew wide with surprise and nervousness. "Miss Watson," Margaret said in a warm and friendly voice, "I have been reviewing your recent algorithm proposal. Would you have time to discuss it with me this afternoon? Perhaps we could meet in my office." Emily stared at Margaret for a moment, unable to believe what she was hearing. She had never spoken directly to Dr. Harrison before. In fact, she had never even been to the executive floor where Dr. Harrison's office was located. Of course, Dr. Harrison," Emily stammered, her voice shaking slightly with nervousness and excitement. "I would be honored to meet with you." "Excellent," Margaret said with a smile. "Shall we say 3 o'clock? My assistant will show you to my office." From across the office, James Fletcher had been watching this entire conversation with growing worry and unease. He had heard rumors circulating round the office that Dr. Harrison was preparing to present something very important to the board of directors next week. The rumors suggested it was something about a new efficiency algorithm that could change how the entire company operated. James had been making his own plans regarding Emily's project. As her senior manager, he had been planning to take credit for mentoring and guiding her work. After all, that was how the business world worked. Senior managers got credit for their team's accomplishments. James had already begun preparing his own presentation about the algorithm, planning to present it as something his team had developed under his leadership. But seeing Dr. Harrison's direct and personal interest in Emily Watson made James feel very nervous and worried. This was not part of his plan. James Fletcher had no idea just how nervous and worried he should really be. The boardroom at Thompson and Associates felt different that Friday morning. The air was thick with tension, and everyone could sense that something very important was about to happen. Round the large, polished wooden table sat 12 of the company's most senior executives. These were the people who made all the big decisions about the company's future. At the head of the table sat Robert Thompson himself, The man who had started the company 30 years ago with just a small office and a big dream, now Thompson and Associates was one of the most successful technology companies in London, employing hundreds of people and serving clients all around the world. Dr. Margaret Harrison stood at the front of the room, holding a small remote control in her hand. In front of her was a stack of documents and files. Her face was serious and determined. Margaret had called this emergency meeting, which was unusual. Emergency meetings only happened when something very important or very serious needed to be discussed. Gentlemen and ladies, Margaret began, her voice strong and clear with the confidence that came from decades of experience in the business world. I have called this emergency meeting today to address two very important issues. First, I want to present to you a revolutionary computer algorithm that could completely transform how efficiently our company operates. Second, I need to discuss a very serious matter of workplace conduct and intellectual property theft. James Fletcher sat in his chair feeling very uncomfortable and nervous. He kept shifting his position and tugging at his expensive tie. James had expected this meeting to go very differently. He had planned to be the one standing at the front of the room, presenting Emily's algorithm as his own work. As Emily's senior manager, he had planned to take credit for guiding and mentoring her project. Instead, James found himself facing Dr. Margaret Harrison's cold, steady gaze. Her eyes seemed to look right through him, and he had the uncomfortable feeling that she knew exactly what he had been planning to do. The algorithm I am about to show you, Margaret continued, was developed entirely by Miss Emily Watson, one of our junior software engineers. Her work is not only brilliant and innovative, it is also incredibly valuable if we implement her algorithm throughout our company. It will save us approximately £300,000 every single year. Margaret clicked her remote control, and suddenly Emily's algorithm appeared on the large screen at the front of the room. The complicated diagrams and code filled the screen, showing the elegant solution that Emily had created to improve the company's data processing systems. The board members all leaned forward in their chairs, immediately recognizing the potential of what they were seeing. Several of them whispered to each other, pointing at different parts of the presentation and nodding with approval and excitement. However, Margaret continued, and now her voice grew colder and more serious. I have discovered some very disturbing information. Mr. James Fletcher has been systematically undermining Miss Watson's confidence through months of public humiliation and cruel treatment. Furthermore, he has been planning to claim credit for her innovations and present them as his own work. Margaret clicked her remote again. This time, the screen filled with screenshots of email messages. The board members could clearly see emails where James discussed taking credit for what he called his team's work. The messages showed that James had been planning to present Emily's algorithm as something he had developed and supervised. Then Margaret clicked again, and security camera footage appeared on the screen. The board members watched in uncomfortable silence as they saw James Fletcher publicly mocking and humiliating Emily Watson in the office. They could see him laughing at her, dismissing her ideas, and making her feel small in front of all her colleagues. This is not simply workplace bullying, Margaret said firmly, her voice filled with authority and anger. This is intellectual property theft and discrimination. Mr. Fletcher has been stealing the work of a talented young employee while simultaneously trying to destroy her confidence and drive her out of the company. Robert T.H. Thompson's face grew red with anger as he watched the footage and read the emails. He had built his company on principles of fairness and respect, and seeing this kind of behavior made him furious. James, Robert Thompson said, his voice shaking with anger, "Is this true? Have you been treating one of our employees this way?" James Fletcher tried to answer, but his voice came out as nervous stammering. He attempted to explain the technical aspects of Emily's algorithm, thinking that if he could show he understood the work, he might be able to convince everyone that he had been involved in creating it. But as James tried to speak about the algorithm, it quickly became clear to everyone in the room that he did not understand the first thing about how Emily's program actually worked. He could not explain the code, he could not describe the testing process, and he could not answer any technical questions about the system. "I think," Margaret said quietly, but her voice carried clearly through the silent room, "that Miss Watson should present her own work to this board. She deserves the opportunity to show you what she has accomplished." Margaret walked to the boardroom door and opened it. "Emily, would you please join us?" The door opened wider, and Emily Watson walked into the room. She was no longer the frightened, quiet young woman who had endured months of humiliation and cruel treatment. In her hand, she carried a folder containing months of documentation, computer code, research notes, and test results. Emily's head was held high, and her eyes were clear and determined. It was time for the truth to be told. Emily Watson stood before the 12 most powerful people at Thompson & Associates, and her hands trembled slightly as she held her folder of documents. But when she began to speak, her voice was clear and strong. She had prepared for this moment, without even knowing it, through all those late nights working alone in the empty office. For 30 minutes, Emily walked the board members through every single detail of her algorithm. She explained how she had first noticed the problems with the company's data processing system. She described the months of research she had done to find a solution. She showed them the lines of computer code she had written, explaining in simple terms how each part worked together to create something amazing. Emily talked about the extensive testing she had performed, running her algorithm hundreds of times to make sure it worked perfectly. She presented charts and graphs showing exactly how much time and money the company would save. She answered technical questions with confidence and clarity, proving that she understood every aspect of her creation. The boardroom was completely silent, except for Emily's voice. All 12 executives listened with intense focus and growing amazement. Even Robert Thompson, who was famous for getting bored during long presentations, hung on every single word that Emily spoke. Her passion for her work and her deep understanding of the technical details impressed everyone in the room. When Emily finished her presentation, something wonderful happened. The board members erupted with questions, but these were not the kind of dismissive challenges that James Fletcher had always thrown at her. These were genuine questions from curious and interested business leaders who wanted to understand more about her innovative approach. "How did you think of this solution?" asked one executive. "What gave you the idea to approach the problem this way?" asked another. "Have you considered how this might be applied to other systems?" asked a third. For the first time in months, Emily felt truly heard and respected. These important people were treating her ideas seriously and recognizing the value of her work. She answered each question thoughtfully and completely, feeling more confident with every response. "Extraordinary work, Miss Watson," Robert Thompson said finally, his voice filled with admiration and respect. "This is absolutely extraordinary. In 30 years of running this company, I have rarely seen such innovative and valuable work from any employee." Dr. Margaret Harrison smiled with pride and satisfaction. "I move that we immediately implement Miss Watson's algorithm throughout the entire company," she announced to the board. "I also move that we promote her to senior software engineer with immediate effect, and that we begin disciplinary proceedings against Mr. James Fletcher for harassment and attempted theft of intellect. Ewell property." The vote was unanimous. 12 board members raised their hands in support of Margaret's motion. There was no debate, no discussion needed. Emily's work spoke for itself, and James Fletcher's behavior was clearly unacceptable. That afternoon, James Fletcher was escorted from the building by security guards. Emily watched from her office window as he walked to his expensive car for her. The last time, she felt no satisfaction or happiness watching him leave. Instead, she felt a kind of peaceful closure, as if a difficult chapter of her life was finally ending. 6 months later, Emily stood on a stage at the London Technology Conference, looking out at an audience of hundreds of technology professionals from around the world. She was wearing a beautiful new dress and speaking confidently into the microphone about her revolutionary algorithm. Emily's innovation had not only saved Thomson and Associates the money she had promised, it had done something even more amazing. It had revolutionized the entire technology industry. Other companies had heard about Emily's breakthrough and wanted to use her system too. Thomson and Associates was now licensing Emily's algorithm to dozens of other businesses, creating a completely new source of income for the company. But the money and recognition, though wonderful, were not the most important changes in Emily's life. The most important change was that Emily had found her voice and her confidence. She was no longer the quiet, frightened young woman who had doubted her own abilities. Emily had established a mentorship program at Thomson and Associates to help other young engineers from backgrounds like hers. She worked especially with people who came from small towns or poor families, people who might feel out of place in the big city business world. She taught them that being quiet and thoughtful did not mean being weak, and that sometimes the most powerful allies came from the most unexpected places. As Emily looked out at the audience at the technology conference, she remembered her grandmother's wise words. Still waters run deep. Child, your worth was never in question. You just needed the right people to see it, in the front row of the audience. Dr. Margaret Harrison sat beaming with pride. Margaret had become more than Emily's boss. She had become her mentor and friend. Emily had learned that sometimes we all need someone to believe in us before we can learn to believe in ourselves. Emily Watson, the girl from the small village of Little Thornton, had found her place in the world. She had not done it by becoming louder or more aggressive. She had done it by refusing to let anyone make her feel smaller than she really was. In the end, talent and good character had won over cruelty and privilege. Emily knew this was a victory worth celebrating, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever felt different or out of place. The end.